I need you to read this carefully, not because I want you to believe me. I have stopped caring whether people believe me. Read it carefully because there are details in here that might save your life if you ever find yourself on the wrong road. And you will not know it is the wrong road until it is already too late to turn back. I have been a highway surveyor for the Illinois Department of Transportation for 11 years. I drive routes nobody else drives, maintenance corridors, access roads. The unnamed connector strips between interstates that appear on official maps only as thin gray lines with no labels, no mile markers, no names. Roads that exist on paper to serve a function, but are, for all practical purposes, invisible to the public. I have driven thousands of miles of roads that the world has forgotten about. One of them remembered me. The work order came on a Tuesday in February, routed through my supervisor Dale with no flags, no special instructions. Survey and document the surface condition of Maintenance Corridor Illinois AC 7714, a rural access road in Hardin County, far southern Illinois. Approximately 41 miles. One day, maybe two if weather was bad. Standard stuff. Hardin County is the least populated county in Illinois. It sits wedged between the Ohio River and the Shawnee National Forest, a tangle of river bluffs and hollow ravines and second-growth timber reclaiming farmland that gave up on people decades ago. Cell signal is a rumor down there. The nearest hospital is over an hour away. People who grow up there develop a particular self-sufficiency, a wariness about the land, a knowledge that the forest will take back whatever you do not actively defend. I drove down the night before and stayed in a motel in Elizabethtown, 8 miles from the entry point. The woman at the front desk looked at my IDOT truck and asked me where I was surveying. I told her the general area. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she handed me my room key and said quietly, "Don't go past dark." I thought she was making a joke about the roads. I laughed a little. She did not. Dawn came gray and cold, the kind of February morning that makes southern Illinois feel like the end of something. I drove the 3 miles past Cave-in Rock with my work tablet showing the corridor entry point as a blinking blue marker on the county road. Found it exactly where it was supposed to be. A gravel turnoff heading west-northwest into the bluffs. No signage, no gate. The gravel was old but packed solid. I noted the time, 6:48 in the morning. Logged the entry in my survey software and turned in. The first thing that was wrong was the silence. I have surveyed rural corridors in February 100 times. There are always sounds. Crows mostly, the ratty complaining bark of them in bare treetops, and under that the background noise of distance. Farm dogs, far-off traffic, wind in the cedars. The sounds that tell you the world is still running even when you cannot see it. There were no sounds, not reduced sounds, no sounds. The world on either side of that gravel road was as silent as a room that has been sealed for years. I noticed it the way you notice when a refrigerator stops humming. Not immediately, but suddenly. With a cold certainty that something that should be there is not. I turned on the radio. Static. Not the rolling static of a weak signal, but a dense, constant static, the same in every direction I turned the dial. Like the air itself was generating noise to fill the gap. I turned the radio off and kept driving. At mile 4, the road stopped going west-northwest. There was no turn, no fork. The road simply stopped obeying the compass. My work tablet showed my blue dot moving exactly along the documented corridor, but the landscape outside the truck was wrong. According to the topographic overlay on my survey data, I should have been descending into a creek drainage, dropping maybe 80 feet over the next mile. Instead, I was climbing. A long, gradual ascent up a ridge dense with old-growth oak. The kind of trees that take a century to grow that thick. And the valley below me, visible through the gaps, was at least 300 feet down. I stopped the truck and sat for a moment. Below me, through the trees, I could see the silver thread of a river. The problem was that according to every map I had, there was no river in that direction. The Ohio was east. Every tributary of any size was accounted for in the survey data I was carrying. That river below me was not on any map I had ever seen. It was wide, it moved slowly, and it was wrong. I got out of the truck and stood on the road. Here is the thing about silence that takes time to understand. There are different kinds. There is the silence of a space where sound has died, a church after the choir stops, a forest after a gunshot. That silence has an echo in it, the ghost of the sound that was just there. And then there is the silence of a space where sound has never been allowed to exist in the first place. A packed, pressurized silence that pushes back against noise rather than absorbing it. The road was the second kind. I clapped my hands together, hard, deliberately. The sound vanished so quickly that for a moment I doubted I had made it. I clapped again. Same thing. Like the air was eating the sound before it could travel. I got back in my truck and tried to turn around. The entrance road was gone. I'm going to describe what happened in the next 3 hours as accurately as I can, because accuracy is the only thing that stands between a report and a story, and I need this to be a report. I drove forward for 12 miles. I know it was 12 because I watched the odometer. I marked every feature I passed with timestamps in my survey notes, because the habit of documentation is what kept me functional when everything else was trying to make me stop functioning. Mile 1.1. A rusted wire gate on the left side of the road, padlocked with a chain. Standard farm gate, nothing unusual, but the ground in front of the gate on both sides of the fence line showed no tracks. No tire marks, no boot prints, no deer trails. Whatever that gate was meant to keep out or in, nothing had ever tested it. Mile 2.6. A concrete culvert over a dry creek bed. I stopped and looked down into it. The concrete was old, probably from the 1950s, but it was in perfect condition. Not mossy, not stained, as if water had never run through it. In Hardin County in February, that creek should have been running. That creek had been dry for a very long time, or possibly forever. Mile 4.0. Iron fence posts pre-war aligned with unnatural precision. I have seen hundreds of old fence lines in my career. They sag, they lean. The soil shifts under them over decades and they follow the land's own slow collapse. These posts were perfectly vertical, perfectly spaced. I measured 4 of them, 18 inches apart within a millimeter of each other. No one spaces fence posts by hand to within a millimeter of each other. You cannot do that with a machine either, not without a level and a jig. Someone had taken extraordinary care on a road that no one was supposed to be on. Mile 6.3. A wide gravel pullout, the gravel freshly raked. I got out and crouched next to the rake marks. They were precise, parallel lines, the kind you see in Japanese Zen gardens. Deliberate, made recently. The gravel was still sharp-cornered, not yet settled back into its natural random packing. I was standing in the raked gravel when I noticed the marks were not just parallel. At the far end of the pullout, they converged slowly, subtly, toward the center. The way forced perspective drawings create the illusion of depth. The raked gravel was pointing at something, pointing directly down the road in the direction I was traveling. I left faster than I had arrived. Mile 8.9. A wooden sign 8 feet tall facing away from me. I could see the back of it. Bare weathered boards, no markings. I thought about stopping to read it from the front. I kept driving. Something was wrong with the trees at this point. They had been second-growth hardwood, normal for southern Illinois. But gradually, without my noticing exactly when it had changed, they had become something older. The trunks were massive, 3 and 4 feet in diameter, the kind of growth that takes centuries. The canopy was closed overhead despite being February and the trees being deciduous. The branches were bare, but there were so many of them, interlaced so densely, that the sky above the road was reduced to a web of dark lines against pale gray. Looking up was like looking at a crack in something. Mile 9.2. My work tablet went gray, not off. Gray like it was between states, not a crash, not a locked screen, just gray like it was waiting for input I could not provide. My phone did the same thing a few minutes later, except instead of gray, my phone screen went to minimum brightness and displayed a photograph I had never set as my wallpaper, a field at noon under perfect sun. The kind of image that is the exact visual opposite of where I was. The light in that photo was so bright it hurt to look at on the dim screen. I felt, without being able to justify why, that the photograph was not a default image. It was a message. Someone had put it there for me to see. Someone was telling me to think about sunlight, because we were somewhere that did not have any. Mile 11.4. I heard something outside the truck. It was behind me and it was keeping pace. Not footsteps, not the irregular rhythm of something walking. A regular mechanical sound, like a large wheel turning, close enough that I should have been able to see something in my mirrors. My mirrors showed empty road. I drove faster. Mile 12.0. The trees ended. The gravel lot opened up in front of me, flat and enormous and horribly well-maintained. In the center of it was the building. Cinder block, 1 story, 60 feet wide, maybe more. White paint gone to the gray-cream color of old bone, flat roof. No windows anywhere on any surface I could see. 1 door, metal painted a dark red. Not fire code red and not barn red, but the specific dark red of something that has been wet and dried many times. Above the door in small block letters, Geographic Records Office, District 9. No public access. There is no Geographic Records Office in any state agency I have ever worked with. There is no District 9 in the Illinois dot. The districts run 1 through 8 and then Central. District 9 does not exist in any organizational chart I have ever seen, before this day or after. I sat in my truck for a long time looking at that door. The sound I had heard at mile 11.4 had stopped when I reached the lot. The silence here was different from the silence on the road. Thicker, if that makes sense. The road silence had been the silence of absence. This was the silence of presence. The silence of a room full of people who have all stopped breathing at the same time. I became aware, sitting there, that the light was wrong. It was mid-morning and the sky above the lot was the color of old pewter, a flat, sourceless gray that cast no shadows. I looked at my hand on the steering wheel. My hand had no shadow. The truck had no shadow. The building had no shadow. Nothing in that lot was casting a shadow, which meant the light was not coming from any single direction. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere, like light in a room where the walls themselves are faintly glowing. The door opened. No one had come to the door. It simply opened, swinging inward, releasing a rectangle of yellow fluorescent light that looked obscenely normal against the gray of everything else. I got out of the truck and went in. I want to be honest with you. There are moments in extreme situations where your body makes decisions that your mind has not caught up to yet. My body had already decided this was necessary before my mind had finished arguing about it. I have thought about this many times since. I do not think my body was wrong. The interior was an archive. Floor-to-ceiling industrial shelving loaded with flat map drawers, rolled document tubes and banker's boxes labeled in a typeface I did not recognize. Not quite any standard font, close to something official but subtly off. The way a word looks wrong after you stare at it too long. The fluorescent lights hummed at a frequency I felt in my teeth and behind my eyes. The floor was linoleum, scuffed with the marks of many boots. Someone had been working here. The evidence was everywhere. A coffee mug still warm on the central table. A pair of reading glasses folded on top of an open document. A survey marker, the kind we use in the field. A bright orange stake, leaning against the near shelving unit, still dirty with red clay soil. Someone had just been here. So recently that the coffee was still warm and they had simply stepped away. With no warning, no preparation, leaving their glasses and their coffee and their dirty field equipment. I was afraid to touch anything. I walked to the computer at the far end of the room. The monitor was on. It displayed a spreadsheet with 5 columns: route ID, entry date, surveyor, status, and notes, hundreds of rows. The scroll bar on the right side of the screen was a thin sliver. The document was enormous. I found Illinois AC 7714 on the 3rd page of scrolling. Entry date, February 14th. Surveyor, pending. Status, in transit. Notes, standard acclamation. Allow 6 to 8 hours. Do not intervene. The row below mine had a different ID, a different date. Status, in transit. Notes, standard acclamation. Allow 6 to 8 hours. Do not intervene. Every visible row had the same status. Every visible row had the same note. I scrolled to the bottom of the document. There were 4,114 rows, not 400, 4,114. And at the very bottom, below all the others, a row that had been entered so recently the text was a slightly different shade than the rows above it, fresher. The way wet ink looks different from dry. Illinois AC 7714. February 14th. Cole D. Status on site. Notes. Surveyor is in the building. My name is David Cole. You found your entry. The voice came from directly behind me. The man who had spoken was standing 4 feet away, close enough that I should have heard him approach on the linoleum floor. He was wearing a tan work uniform with the Compass Rose logo on his chest pocket. He was perhaps 60 years old, with a face like a topographic map, all deep lines and weathered surface. His eyes were the color of the clay soil on the survey stake. He was not carrying the coffee mug. He was not wearing the reading glasses. He had not been the person who had just been here. "Sit down," he said. I sat. I'm not proud of how quickly I sat. He took the chair across from me. He laced his hands together on the table and looked at me with the expression of a man reading a document he has already read many times. "You're earlier than projected," he said. "Usually acclimation to the corridor takes the full 6 to 8 hours. You've been on site for 4 hours and 11 minutes. "What is this place?" I said. It was not a question the way I said it. It was more like something I was setting down in front of him. "A records facility," he said. "For what?" "Geographic anomalies." He said it the way you say the bathroom is down the hall. "A fact, a direction." The Land Survey of the United States, conducted between 1785 and the early 20th century, was not perfect. The surveyors were working in difficult terrain with imprecise instruments. In the process of surveying, they occasionally, not often, but occasionally created spaces. Created. Defined. A survey does not just measure space, it constitutes it. When a boundary is drawn precisely enough, the space inside it becomes real in a specific way. Fixed, coherent, bounded. When the survey contains an error, the space defined by that error is also real. It is just real in a different way. He paused. This corridor is one such space. The building is in the error. "And the 4,000 people on that spreadsheet," I said. His expression did not change. "Surveyors," he said. "Government surveyors mostly. A few private contractors. People who drove roads in their professional capacity and found themselves here. And they left." The pause that followed was brief. A fraction of a second. "But I have worked with professional liars in my career, and I have learned to read the pause before an answer." This pause was the pause of a man choosing between two true things, picking the one that served him better. "They were given the option," he said. "That is not the same as they left." He looked at me. For the first time, something shifted in his face. Not discomfort, not guilt, something more like respect. The look of a man who has been underestimated and has just recalibrated. "No," he said, "it is not." There was a second door at the back of the archive room. I had not noticed it when I came in. It was the same gray-cream color as the cinder block wall and set into a recess, and the lighting in that corner was slightly dimmer than the rest of the room. It had no handle, no visible hinges, just a small keypad panel on the wall beside it with a numeric keypad and a single LED indicator. The LED was not red, it was green. "What is behind that door?" I said. "Restricted," he said. "The light is green, it is unlocked." "Restricted," he said again, and there was a new quality in his voice, not harder but more careful, the way you speak around something fragile, and then I heard it. Behind the door there was sound, not mechanical sound, not the hum of equipment or the rattle of ventilation, though those sounds were present too underneath. The sound I heard was human, or had been human at some point. It was rhythmic and low, and it had no melody, not humming, not moaning. Not any sound with emotion in it, more like the sound of someone reciting numbers or coordinates, the cadence of a person reporting data to someone who was not answering, over and over, the same rhythm, the same flat, exhausted cadence. I looked at the coordinator. His face had gone very still. "How long," I said quietly, "has someone been behind that door?" "That is not a question I am permitted to answer." "How long have you been here?" He looked at his watch. It was a habit, I realized. Checking the watch was not about time. It was about having somewhere else to put his eyes. "You have 2 hours and 43 minutes remaining in your egress window," he said. "I would recommend leaving now." "Answer the question." "Mr. Cole." He said my name with precision, the way you say something you want to land. "I have answered the questions I am permitted to answer. The door is restricted. The corridor is closing in 2 hours and 42 minutes. If you remain past that window, the egress route that leads back to the county road will be unavailable." "What is the other egress?" "Longer," he said. Much longer, and the terminus is not convenient. He held my eyes when he said those words, and something passed between us that was not in his words. A man behind a desk in a cinder block building at the end of a road that does not exist on any map, telling me with his eyes what he could not tell me with his mouth. Get out now. Get out while you still know the way, because the other egress goes somewhere and I will not tell you where, but I am telling you right now, with everything I cannot say, that you do not want to find out. I stood up. The map drawers, I said. I want to look at them first. He checked his watch. 15 minutes. I will not describe everything I found in those drawers, partly because I do not have the space, and partly because I have learned in the months since that certain details seem to function like keys. Once you have them, they open something in your mind that you cannot close again. I will not do that to you. What I will tell you is this. The maps covered every state in the continental US, most of Canada, and in a separate section near the back, parts of Europe and one region in northern Russia that I did not have enough cartographic knowledge to identify precisely. Every map showed the same structure: standard road, deviation, corridor, holding point. Every holding point was marked with a black square. Every black square was labeled the same way: holding point. The total number of maps in those drawers was, by my rough estimate, somewhere between 600 and 800. There were that many places in the world where the survey had gone wrong, that many buildings in that many impossible locations, each one with fluorescent lights and a central table and a spreadsheet and a second door with a green light, and sounds behind it that I do not want to think about. In the very back of the final drawer I opened, loose without a folder or any label, was a photograph. A Polaroid, a man standing on the gravel lot outside the building. Work clothes, 1970s, hard hat held at his side. He was smiling at the camera, and I want to be precise about this smile because I have spent months with it and I have had to be precise to stay sane. It was not the smile of a man who was happy. It was not the smile of a man who had accepted something. It was the smile of a man who was performing happiness for someone standing behind the camera. A smile constructed with great deliberate effort by someone who understood that this photograph would eventually leave this place, and who wanted the person who eventually found it to see that he had, at the moment the shutter clicked, still been trying. Behind him, the red door was open, and through the open door, visible in the dimness of the interior, was the second door. The second door was also open. I could not see clearly what was on the other side. The angle was wrong. The photograph's resolution was too low, the interior too dark, but there was light back there, not fluorescent light, something else, something that had no color I could name, and in that light there were shapes, tall shapes that were not furniture and were not equipment and were not walls. I put the photograph in my breast pocket. I have it still. I went back to the main room and told the coordinator I was leaving. Good, he said. It was the first word he had said that sounded entirely unguarded. Like I had made him genuinely, personally relieved. The drive back was 41 miles. I had driven 12 miles in. The road had added 29 miles on the return trip, and I watched every one of them on the odometer, and I did not stop. The features were out of order. The culvert appeared after the fence posts. The raked pullout was in the wrong place. I recognized all of them, but in the wrong sequence, like a sentence with the words rearranged. Still legible, still meaningful, but meaning something different than before. At mile 36, both sides of the road went completely dark. Not darker, dark. The trees on either side closed over the road, and the sourceless light in the sky was blocked, and for 0.8 of a mile I drove in genuine total blackness with only my headlights showing the gravel in front of me. In my headlights, in the gravel directly ahead of my truck, I could see marks. Fresh marks, sharp-edged in the stones. Not tire marks. Something had been walking on this road. Something with a stride interval of about 6 feet, and feet that pressed down not with the edge-end ball pattern of a biped, but with even full-surface pressure. Like a stamp. Like something that has no natural gait because it was not built for walking. The tracks went in the same direction I was driving. I did not slow down. At mile 38, I came out of the darkness and the light returned, and there was the wooden sign on the left side of the road, facing me now, 8 feet tall and freshly painted. Please tell someone. Below that, in smaller letters that had not been there on the way in, as if they had been added while I was inside the building. They can hear you, but they cannot come back. I could not come back. You still can. I drove the final 2.5 miles with my foot on the floor. Junction with the county road. Right turn. Gravel becoming asphalt. Asphalt becoming the familiar grid of rural Illinois. The radio found a signal. I pulled into the first gas station I could find and sat in the parking lot until my hands stopped shaking. That took about an hour. Gerald Hopp. That is the name on the missing persons report I found in the digitized archives of the Southern Illinoisan newspaper. Highway maintenance worker, IDOT District 13. Disappeared October 1971 while on a solo inspection assignment in Hardin County. His truck was found unlocked on a county road. Gerald was 43 years old. He had a wife and 2 daughters. The man in the Polaroid is 43 years old. He disappeared in October. The photograph was taken in what appears to be summer. The lot behind him looks dry, the air clear. He vanished in October and the photograph was taken in summer, which means the photograph was taken before he disappeared, which means he went into that building and came back out, smiled for a photograph and then went back. Or was taken back, or never fully left. I have re-examined the photograph many times since. I have looked at it with a magnifying glass. The smile is deliberate, constructed, I stand by that. But under the smile in the eyes, there is something I have been trying to name for 8 months and have only recently found the right word for. Recognition. He is looking at the camera with recognition. Not like he knows the person holding the camera. Like he knows the person who will eventually receive this photograph through the dark mechanism of distance and time, and a map drawer in a building at the end of a road that does not exist. Like he looked through the lens and through the years and saw you, saw me, said, I know you will find this. I know because I was you. 2 weeks after my survey, I received an email at my personal address, not my work address, from a string of random characters at a domain that resolved to nothing when I tried to open it. It read, your report for Illinois AC 7714 is overdue. Please complete the attached form. The attachment was pre-filled. The documented road condition read, unchanged, holding point nominal, secondary corridor traffic within expected parameters, secondary corridor traffic. I thought about the tracks in the gravel, the 6-foot stride interval, the full surface pressure prints, secondary corridor traffic within expected parameters. The email continued. We observed that you accessed the physical archive during your site visit and removed a document. This is irregular but not unprecedented. We ask only that in any account you choose to share, you omit specific route coordinates and access timing windows. This is not for our protection. There are people who would enter these corridors deliberately. Some of them would not leave. We would prefer not to be responsible for that. I believe this. I have omitted the coordinates. I have changed the county. I have changed the route number. I have not described the timing windows with enough precision to replicate. But I have not changed the sign. Gerald Hopp built that sign with materials that had no business being on that road. He built it and pointed it outward and put it where it would be visible to anyone who made it back. He left the one piece of information that was too important to leave out, more important than the coordinates, more important than the timing windows. They can hear you, but they cannot come back. 4,114 rows on that spreadsheet. The coordinator said they were given the option to leave, and some of them took it. I took it. You are reading this because I took it. But 4,000 rows, 4,000 people driving their professional roads, 4,000 blue dots on work tablets, 4,000 cups of coffee going cold in motels in counties they do not quite make it back from, 4,000 families with a missing persons report and a truck found on a county road and no explanation, 4,000 people who found a door with a green light, and sounds behind it that I still hear some nights when everything else is quiet, that flat, exhausted cadence. The voice of someone who has been reporting coordinates to someone who stopped answering a very long time ago, in a room behind an unlocked door, in a building in a space defined by a surveying error from 1887, reciting the numbers of a road that does not go anywhere anymore, reciting them anyway, because that is what surveyors do. I am still employed by the IDOT, 6 months to my pension. I drive the routes I am assigned, and I do not deviate, and I do not explore. And when a corridor designation shows up in my queue with a route number in the 7000 series, I flag it as inaccessible due to surface conditions and move on. I sleep mostly. Some nights are harder than others. My daughter is 12. My wife teaches 2nd grade. The house is quiet and warm and lit by a sun that casts shadows, actual shadows, because the light comes from one place and the world is solid enough to block it. I think about that a lot now. The shadowless light in that gravel lot. How wrong it was. How wrong it felt to stand in a world without shadow. You do not know what you have until it is gone. That is the saying. But it is not quite right. You do not know what you have until you stand in a place where it is not. And you understand, fully and physically and in your bones, what kind of darkness gets in when the light stops coming from somewhere. If you work for a state dot in any state, check your queue. If you see a corridor designation with a 4-digit number in the 7000 series, do not drive it alone. Tell someone exactly where you are going. Leave a written record. If the road is in better condition than it should be, turn around. If the radio only gives you static, turn around. If your shadow disappears, you are already too far in. Drive forward. Do not stop. Watch the odometer. Do not look into the trees. Do not look for the source of the walking sounds. And if you reach the building, you have 3 hours. Leave in 2. Do not ask about the second door. Do not look at the spreadsheet. Take nothing from the map drawers.